Awesome. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we kind of go over our TSHAC program and compliance overview. I am Selena Misquez-Stubbs, Director of Asset Oversight, as Michael mentioned. And I really quickly want to say hello to my team who I know are on the call, Mercedes Moody and Blair Bigelow, our AOC specialist. I see a few friendly names and faces on here as well. So hi to everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So TSHAC was created by the Texas legislature to serve as a statewide affordable housing provider. We offer a variety number of programs, but today we're going to focus on the program compliance for the two financing options that we have to help create and preserve affordable housing. We offer multifamily tax exempt bonds and loans through our Texas Housing Impact Fund program. These programs have very different compliance requirements, and because of that, I'll be discussing them separately. I'll get started with the bonds first and then finish our presentation with the THIF program. Oops, look at that. I'm a little excited for today. Okay, so let's get started with the bond program. I wanted to provide everyone with the regulatory framework that guides everything we do with our bonds. And so on this slide, I bring together some laws, government codes, policies that outline our authority to issue bonds. And it also outlines how we monitor our programs. So let's see, sorry about that. Can everybody see my slides just fine?
No, I still don't see it.
Okay. Let me go back to, thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. There we go.
All right, I'll get.
Everybody can see that now? Okay.
Yes.
Let's get to the slide where I left off on. Okay, so we were just about to get started on the bond program. So this slide here brings together all of the regulations that we use to issue and monitor our bond program. So section 142D of the code defines a qualified residential rental project for bonds. Under this code, a project must meet one of the following tests. The 2050 test, which is defined as 20% of the units must be occupied by households at or below the 50% area median income threshold, or the 40 at 60 test, which is defined by 40% of the units must be occupied by households at or below the 60% AMI test. I list a few other items here. Listed the Texas Government Code that defines TSHAC's purpose, gives us the authority to issue bonds, and provides us with enforcement provisions. The TSHAC compliance policy and compliance manuals offer general threshold requirements for the program, discusses our review workflow, includes income and asset calculation rules for the program, and a comprehensive list of potential noncompliance issues with associated penalties. For each development that does receive our bonds, we create and draft agreements. So each property will have a regulatory agreement and an asset and oversight compliance agreement. And of course, I've got to mention our Department of Housing and Urban Development. So this program does adopt HUD's policy and procedures for defining occupancy eligibility, determination of household incomes, specific to Chapter 3, Chapter 5, has been revised, majorly revised by the Hotman notice that was published in 2023. We also utilize the HUD income limits for this program. And with HOTMA release, we now monitor the inflation adjustment and passbook rates that are published annually by HUD that directly affect the bond program with asset limitation thresholds, passbook rates, and student income allowances. So TSHAC receives 10% of the state's annual bond volume cap. All proposed developments must meet at least one of these targeted housing needs that are established by our board of directors each year. Once an application is received, it goes through a thorough application process that I summarize nicely here in six slides, six sections. And all to, to save some time on just letting you know that once it goes through this application process and the bond are issued and the deal is closed, after the construction or the acquisition and rehabilitation of a development, it then enters program compliance. And that's when it goes to our department. The Asset Oversight and Compliance Department receives all of the bond closing transcripts. When this happens, it triggers two actions. We immediately identify when the compliance reporting begins for each development. So for acquisition rehab developments, it begins no later than 12 months from the AOC effective date. And for new construction, no later than 2 years from the AOC effective date. Secondly, it prompts our department to prepare and send an informative introductory email where we introduce the AOC team. We provide copies of executed regulatory and AOC agreements. We provide a review of some, but not all, compliance requirements. But most importantly, this is the time where we onboard all external users for this development onto our online compliance system. And while this introductory email is not required, we take this extra step to make sure that a compliance team or site management team is set up for compliance success. So I wanted to provide you a quick snapshot of what an introductory email looks like. I understand it looks extremely lengthy because it is, but it really does lay out basic requirements for the development, specific to the development to ensure program compliance. And while this slide does not show the end of my email, I do want to let everybody know that we always end this introductory email with the option of scheduling a virtual call with all team members for this development to ensure that they understand the requirements of the bond program. So now that we've set the stage, let's dig in specifically to tenant file requirements. So as I was preparing this slide, I really wanted to simplify the process as best I could to ensure that we can get through everything, but also to really show like the basics of a tenant file and what my team and I look for when we review files. So first and foremost, it is extremely imperative that owners create and follow written policies to ensure program eligibility. And when we come on site, we're requesting these written documents so that we can read what your development's process is, and we review files with that in mind. The next is having a good application. So most of our developments are using the Texas Apartment Association application, but for those that aren't, I do want to clarify that TSHAC does not require a specific application. But if you're not using TAA's lease application, then please know that my team and I do look at it to make sure that it's asking all of the required questions. More specifically, to ensure that it's asking for all household members to disclose income and assets for the household. Once that application is completed, we urge management staff to make sure that they review that application to ensure it's completed to its entirety, and also to screen that application for all possible income and assets that will need to be verified for program eligibility. And that leads me to step 3, verifications. So the verification of income, assets, and student status must be completed within 120 days from the initial occupancy date. Management staff must make a diligent and good faith effort to determine that all income information is accurate. So let's take a moment really quickly to discuss the biggest hot topic right now for our bond programs, asset verifications. So as most of you on the call know, On February 14th of 2023, HUD published the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act, referred to as HOTMA, final rule. This rule was published to streamline the process of how multiple programs look at income and, of course, update how we look at new income. And what that did was revise a lot of Chapter 5 from the HUD handbook, which is used to calculate income and determine household income. And this one rule changed how we document assets, not only across the board in the industry, but specific to bond developments. So let's go to that first bullet point. So for tax-exempt bond development, HOTMA requires assets to be verified and documented at the time of initial certification and every third year where income certifications are completed. In addition to that, if the properties are required to complete a full annual recertification each year, in the intervening years, if a household's assets are equal to or less than the applicable asset limitation threshold, assets and income from assets can be documented with an asset self-certification form. They also changed the amount of statements we can use to verify assets. So with HOTMA, we now only require one statement that reflects the current balance of any banking or financial account. Now, I understand this is a lot to oh my goodness, sorry about that. I understand that this is a lot of information to kind of digest. So let's take a really quick look at this chart that I've included on this slide. So for a tenant who moved in 2024, per the HOTMA requirement, first-hand or third-party verification must be used to document that asset. In the intervening years, which in this case is year 2025 and 2026, should the disclosed assets equal or be less than the asset limitation threshold, households are able to use an asset self-certification form. However, on the third year of recertification, which in this case would be the year 2027, regardless of the household asset amount, assets will need to be verified via first-hand or third party. We can see here that in 2028, in an intervening year, the household disclosed $52,000, and this exceeded the asset limitation threshold for 2025. So the assets in this year must be verified via first-hand or third-party verification methods. So again, this has been a huge departure from how we treated assets years ago. And so what I did here is I referenced where we have this information. Not only is it on our website, but it is in our compliance manual, chapter 2.6 D. And I also wanted to reference that this chart right here is only applicable to the 2025 calendar year. HUD has already published the 2026 inflation adjustments that will take effect January 1, 2026. And I also want to quickly mention that TSHAC did implement all of HOTMA requirements on January 1st, 2024. However, we recently began enforcing it this year, July 1st of 2025. So beginning this past June and moving forward, if assets are not being verified at the time of move-in and every third year, it will result in a finding. So now that we've reviewed the application, verified all income, assets, student status, now we need to record this information. So step 4, we require tenant income certifications to be completed at the time of move-in and annually thereafter. That is correct. You heard me right. For all of our tax-exempt bond communities, income certification is required annually unless the development has been approved with a waiver, which brings us to our next hot topic. The waiver of annual recertification requirement may be requested on developments where 100% of the units are layered with housing tax credits that meet the 50% AMI threshold or the 60% AMI threshold. If a waiver is submitted and approved by TSHAC, verification of income and assets is only required at the time of move-in, followed by an annual eligibility form to be completed annually thereafter. So let's take a quick look at these two developments. So the downtown apartments has TSHAC bonds with a federal set aside of 40% at 60. This development is layered with low income housing tax credits, but that LURA states that 100% of the units will be at or below 60% AMI. So the owner of this development does have the ability to request an annual waiver, and if approved, would be allowed to conduct initial income certifications for program eligibility and conduct AECs annually thereafter. Now, Uptown Apartments is also layered with different program financing, except in this example, the tax-exempt bonds were issued at the 40 at 60 test, but the low-income housing tax credit LURA only shows that 40% of the units will be at 60% AMI or below. In this case, this development is mixed, and the owner will not have the ability to request a waiver. Therefore, full annual recertifications will be required each year. Before we move on, I want to make a quick note that on January 1st, 2025, TSHAC did adopt the use of NCSHA's Universal Compliance Forms, and this was because they did a lot of work to ensure that all of the HOTMA changes are incorporated onto the TIC. However, we also accept the use of the state's income certification form. So move on to step 5, annual recertifications, whether they be full income certifications or the one-page AEC form, must be completed within 120 days from the household's move-in anniversary date. Step 6, TSHAC requires that all adult household members sign the TSHAC health and safety form at the time of move-in, and that form be maintained in the file. The 7th and final step is specific to the lease contract. We always monitor a tenant file to make sure that there is a lease contract that has the lease term dates, the correct rent, the correct occupant names, and that is signed by both the household members and management staff. And that completes what I believe and TSHAC believes are the 7 steps to process and ensure tenant file compliance. So let's move on to our annual reviews and some ongoing compliance for the bond program. So TSHAC conducts annual asset oversight and compliance reviews, both in person and virtually. The review consists of a physical property inspection, a unit inspection, a review of written policies, a review of financial records, as well as a 20% file review of affordable units. AOC staff will issue an AOC review notification letter 30 days in advance of the review. The letter will define what type of review it will be, whether it be in person or virtual, provide you with the date and time, and will request specific reports and written policies to be submitted prior to the review date. And failure to adhere to this notification letter may result in noncompliance. Once a review is completed, AO staff comes back to the office and or completes the virtual review, writes the AOC reports, has it peer reviewed by staff, and issues the completed AOC report to the owner within 30 days of the review date. Corrective action, if any, is due 30 days from the date the report was issued. In addition to conducting the annual AOC, our AOC staff also reviews ongoing compliance. So owners are responsible for submitting monthly online compliance reporting. This consists of a monthly unit status report and a monthly resident service report that are due to us on the 10th of each month. Our AO staff team will review these monthly reports, but will notify owners of issues of noncompliance at the end of each calendar quarter. The owner is also responsible for submitting annual compliance reporting. So this, this includes resident service annual plans that are due on December 1st. These plans should outline what services the property plans to offer the next calendar year. Fair housing sponsor reports are due March 31st. This is an annual certification of compliance requirements by the owner. And waivers, if applicable, are also due March 31st. Owners are also responsible to submit financial statements. Specifically, proposed budgets are due on an annual basis. Unaudited financials are due on a quarterly basis, and audited financials are due on an annual basis. Now, all of these items are detailed in each development AOC agreement. And I just want to remind everyone that all of this ongoing compliance reporting needs to be submitted to the compliance_reports@tshac.org email address. So aside from the complexity of the asset verifications, everything else is pretty straightforward. So why then does it feel that when my team and I go onto sites to the site level that there's a lot of confusion or just difficulty with bond program compliance? Well, I've got your answer. That's because most of our bond developments are layered with housing tax credits. And these two programs have several similarities. So in most cases, Section 142D, that defines a bond program, is similar or mirrors the housing tax credit program. Both programs utilize HUD. As I mentioned, Chapter 3, Chapter 5, we use the published income limits and the inflation adjustment and passbook rate. And we also use same program compliance requirements. For example, we both follow the same student eligibility rules. We both utilize the next available unit rule when it comes to units becoming over income. But there are some differences that we really need to be aware of. For example, regulatory periods. So for bonds specifically, the regulatory agreement will define the qualified project period. And in most cases, this is going to be a minimum of 15 years based on the specific definition for of the qualified project period for that development. LURAs are typically 30 plus years. And HUD, to be completely transparent, I'm not too sure how long those are, but I definitely know they're more than likely more than 15 years. So if anybody on the call has a number that can help me fill in this blank, that would be greatly appreciated. In addition to program differences, we have set-aside requirements. For bonds, the owner must elect between two set-aside tests. For the low-income housing tax credit program, the owner can elect to do 20 at 50, 40 at 60, and or income averaging. And what makes it difficult is that for properties that have multiple financing layers, owners will be required to meet both reporting requirements as well as both set-aside requirements. And I'd like to really quickly look at the specific bond program compliance that differs from a development that's layered with housing tax credit. For the bonds, we do review properties annually. We do request that online reporting is submitting monthly. Bond developments is considered a project and does not recognize buildings. So this really plays into transfers so bonds treat those as move outs and move ins unless there is a written policy stating otherwise. So that completes my bond program and compliance overview of the bond program. I think I will pause here and ask Michael if there's any questions before I move on to the fifth program.
We don't have any questions in the chat. If anybody wants to raise their hand, we can take questions like that as well. I can look real quick. I don't see anybody yet. Yeah, I think we're all good, Selena, if you want to continue on.
Okay, I'll continue. So let's take a quick moment and let's get over to THIF program. Here we go. Okay, THIF program overview. So again, this slide is just a list of the regulatory framework for the THIF program. specific to the TIF application thresholds, workflows, non-compliance penalties for TIF program specific. Okay. So the TIF program supports the creation to promote equal access to safe, decent, and affordable housing with an emphasis on several rural and underserved markets. We offer permanent finance loans, construction loans, and revolving lines of credit. The AOC department monitors compliance requirements specific to the permanent financing loans and some construction loans that are specific to multifamily developments. TSHAC provides loans up to $2 million per project for the construction and rehabilitation of affordable multifamily developments. Interested developers are encouraged to follow the application process listed here. Once the application is reviewed, approved, and closed, executed agreements are sent to the AOC department for compliance purposes. Now, as I've mentioned, the compliance requirements are completely different between the bond program, but also different within the TIF program. So if the loan was funded with capital magnet funds, so that would be the CMF compliance requirements, the AOC team will ensure that at least 52% of the units are at or below the 50% AMI threshold. There is a 10-year compliance period for this program. And during these 10 years, the owner will also be responsible for submitting annual reporting on or before September 15th of each year. This includes submitting a unit status report and submitting copies of annual compliance and annual financial reporting. If the loan was funded with the Affordable Housing Partnership Program, which is listed here as AHP compliance requirements, the owner will have the option to elect anywhere from 1 to 5 units to be reserved for tenants who are receiving Medicare or Medicaid long-term service and supports. Household incomes for this program will be required to be at or below 30% of the AMI. The owner will be required to follow a tenant referral process for a 10-year period. And the owner must also adhere to semi-annual and annual reporting requirements on or before September 15th. So both the CMF and AHP programs are subject to annual review, as I mentioned, on or before September 15th of each year. When TIF developments are layered with the bond program, it is extremely important to know that owners must meet reporting requirements for each program. And each development will have a separate asset oversight and or compliance agreement that will list this information. And that concludes the TIF program compliance. So I know that I've provided a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And so if there's anything that I would ask for you to take from this training today is, read all of the agreements that are required for your development. Educate your site staff. Everybody should know exactly what requirements that development needs to meet. I strongly suggest that you contact TSHAC staff whenever you have a question about compliance, or maybe how a certain rule relates to us versus what other financial layer is on your property. If we know the answer, we'll be happy to answer it. And if not, we'll be sure to send you in the right direction. And also just stay informed. I know that in 2023 with HOTMA, so many things have changed. But also now we have to look at inflation adjustments every year. So there's a lot of information that changes within our industry. And so just staying informed is really, really important to ensuring program compliance. Everything that I have discussed today is available to you on our website. For developers, we've got the link here to share with you. For property managers, compliant teams, you're able to go to our website under Manager Downloads and have all of this information at your fingertips. If there is something that I mentioned that you are not able to find, please make sure to reach out to our AOC staff. You've got our email and our phone numbers. We do travel typically once a month, so just be sure to leave us a voicemail or your email and we will get back to you. And that's it. Michael, do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions in the chat. We can pause for questions from the audience if there are any. Well done, Selena. I am dropping a link into the chat for our past Housing Connection webinars. We have a library of webinars that we've offered over the years and under a variety of topics, whether it's disaster recovery or financial literacy, capacity building, nonprofit management, communications and development, and of course, property management and compliance. And we'll add this one to that portion of the library as well. But feel free to access any of those webinars anytime you want. They're all offered free. And then we'll continue to offer webinars into next year and into the future. We try to do 2 or 3 per year. I think our next one's going to be on rural or not sure yet. Before I mention that, we're not sure what our next one will be on, but look forward to further details. And still don't see any questions. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. And as the holidays approach, we hope you enjoy this season and stay safe out there. Thanks again, Selena, for your time and for everybody else joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you end the recording as well, Selena? And we can stay on just to see if anybody has a question.
Okay. Let me get to recording.